Right. There's a little saying to start us off. Basically, it means even if it takes a long time, let's keep at it and get something done here. So I'm Roberta McIntyre. I'm the president and CEO of FireSafe Sonoma. And our mission, we're the countywide FireSafe Council. There's a lot of other FireSafe councils popping up around the county that are local FireSafe councils. And for the most part, all of our missions are to provide education and outreach related to wildland fire safety throughout Sonoma County. And then with us today is Iris Harrell and Katie Carl. And I'm going to let you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves. Who wants to go?
Okay. Both Katie and I live here in Oakmont, and we're doing this webinar specifically for Oakmonters. I am chair of the newly reconstituted Firewise Safety Committee here at Oakmont, and we realize we have a lot of work to do, and the board is supporting us starting a new Firewise landscape policy. And I'm also chair of the Building Construction Committee, which we are going to also try to fall in line with all of the Firewise suggestions for not only materials, but also for landscaping and the zones that need to be protected from fire around the building.
Yeah.
And I'm Katie Carroll, and I'm the vice chair of the Firewise Safety Committee. I work with a bunch of dedicated, wonderful people who are putting a lot of time and energy into the Firewise goals and the purposes for Oakmont. I'm also on the board of the OEPC, which is the Oakmont Emergency Preparedness Committee. And I'm also the coordinator for Map Your Neighborhood in Oakmont.
All right, thank you guys. All right, let's go ahead and start out, get this thing going. In the presentation today, we call it Firewise and Beautiful, but it's about specifically the defensible space between your non-combustion zone or the no ignition zone, which is about 0 to 5 or 10 feet out from the perimeter of your exterior house. So it's between there and 30 feet out, roughly, around your house and within the defensible space footprint. So we'll be looking at what's sometimes called the defensible space zone 2 out in that area. So moving forward, this is already old information after the fires we've had in the last week. I got this information about a week ago, and I thought, man, I'm going to have some really nice fresh data for this presentation. But now this data has been overshadowed by all of the fires that happened within the last week. So it's hard to even keep up with the amount of fire data that's coming in, not just season by season anymore, but from month to month. And another good statistic I want to throw out there for you folks is that, since 2000, more than 3,000 U.S. communities saw 100-acre or larger wildfires within 10 miles of town. So it is just a crazy, crazy, wicked world we're living in now. And what we need to do to live in that world, in the environment we're living in now, is we need to protect ourselves and our structures. I look at it sometimes as kind of like we need to adapt to the environment. It seems like historically in the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface, it seems like for the longest time when we would build in those areas, what we were trying to do is make nature conform to our will and make nature bend to what we wanted to do with it. And that doesn't work. We need to learn to live with nature. So the way I look at that, it's kind of like, if we're going to the moon, we don't modify the environment of the moon to suit us. We have to wear a suit to go out and walk around on the moon. We have to protect ourselves from radiation, from heat, cold, all these things. And it's getting that way here. We need to figure out how do we survive in this environment that we're living in? And how do we make sure our homes survive? So that's what we're talking about here. In doing that, there are three fundamental elements of a wildland fire that I think we need to protect ourselves from. And I call it the red. We need to protect ourselves from radiant heat, flying embers, and direct flame contact. And the radiant heat, oftentimes that evolves out of vegetation on fire near your home. So what we're talking about today has a direct impact on how much radiated heat your home is going to take when that vegetation catches on fire. So if you've got vegetation close to your home and it's on fire, even if it's not directly touching your home, the heat from that will heat up the combustibles around your home, and it'll heat up your home, increasing it to its ignition temperature. It was about 450 degrees is about the ignition temperature of wood products. And so the more heat that's there, the hotter that material gets, the closer to its ignition temperature it's going to get, the easier it's going to ignite. So the idea is to reduce the chance of having a lot of radiated heat impact combustibles around your house in addition to your house proper. And I call that the R in the red. So then the second element is flying embers and brands. As I mentioned earlier, when I came back from being evacuated, walking around my house to make sure there weren't any spot fires, I found a few embers things that looked like embers that had landed and didn't take hold either because they were cool and weren't hot when they landed, or there just wasn't enough wind on them to get them going. But flying embers can go very, very far. They can vary in size. I've heard stories of embers bigger than the size of footballs flying around during the Tubbs fire. During the Valley fire, where I live, which is probably 22, 23 miles from the seat of that fire, we had homes in our neighborhood go up because of flying embers, also the size of footballs and bigger. And so that's the second really element that we're trying to protect ourselves from in terms of adapting to this environment. In terms of flying embers, that's where the structural hardening element of the whole defensible space concept comes from. Defensible space and structural hardening kind of together. To reduce the impact of flying embers, you want to make sure that 0 to 5 foot area around your house is clear of combustibles, so nothing ignites and imposes direct flame contact, which we'll talk about next. And even more important, you want to keep those embers from getting inside your attic, getting in little crevices around your house, within the structure of it. If you've got valleys or areas of your roof that have changes in direction, like around dormer windows and stuff like that, but ember lands in those corners, particularly if there's combustible material in there from leaves or pine needles, it can take hold. So embers are the second element that we need to be careful of. And that's really where our structural hardening components really make a difference. And I call that the E in the red. And then there's the direct contact by flames. If you have vegetation right next to your house that does catch on fire for whatever reason, whether it's ember fall or radiant heat or whatever, this is really the area where the 0 to 5 foot area is very, very important. If you get anything right next to your house that catches on fire, whether it's a combustible plant or a piece of lawn furniture or the broom you left out there or your doormat, whatever, if it's something that an ember can land on and a fire can grab hold of and start taking off in, you got to rethink about having it there, or move it out of the way or someplace safe when you are in a red flag condition. And I call that the D in the red. So I came up with this acronym, the red, to help us easily remember what those three elements are that we're trying to protect ourselves from in this environment we're trying to adapt to, which is used to be called the wild and urban interface area. It still is, but we're seeing whole subdivisions go up, so in my opinion, it's even beyond just the fringe area between the forest and a urbanized community. It's everywhere that the ember fall can land these days, particularly if you've got a lot of wind and you're in a drought and dry conditions. So as I mentioned earlier, most of this presentation you can reference pages 4 to 7 of our Living with Fire in Sonoma County booklet. And so once again, there's the home ignition zone, which is the 0 to 5 or 10 foot area around your house. The circumnavigated red line around this house really it's more of a metaphor than an actual. If I were to redraw that, it would be, more of a rectangle than a circle around it. But the idea is immediately next to your house, you want to make sure that's pretty much devoid of any combustible material, particularly if you're in a red flag condition. And then today what we're going to talk about is this area here called the Defensible Space Zone 2, the area between the 0 to 5 foot and then 30 feet out from your house, which is most of what you're dealing with in your community. So here's our challenge. Our challenge is to take this condition and clean it up. So what you see here, you've got some dead trees down on the ground. You've got a dead tree standing. You've got junk on the roof. You've got a tree next to a chimney. You've got some dry brush, stuff real close to each other. We're going to walk through this exercise together, and I'll show you the steps to go through to create that defensible space. So step 1 is to determine the recommended distance. And we're saying 30 feet generically, and that's really the minimum. If you're on any kind of slope, the distances downslope need to be increased, assuming the fire moves uphill. These days, it seems like fires, able to, for various reasons, burn downhill given the conditions we're dealing with these days. But in terms of crafting your defensible space, the first step is to look at your property and look at your structures and figure out where is that 30 foot or so distance around my structure that I need to concentrate on and focus my efforts. So that's step 1, figure that out. And figuring it out, if you're on a slope, looks like this. And once again, this graphic is in the Living with Fire in Sonoma County booklet if you want to reference it after the presentation. But if you're on a flat to gentle sloping 0 to 20% slope, 30 to 50 feet is good. If you're dealing with grass, things that don't burn terribly. You want to go out to 100 feet if you've got a lot of field next to you, a lot of shrubs and things like that. And then if you've got, some heavy materials like trees, pine trees, fir trees, stuff like that, you're going to go 30 feet on flat. If you've got, yes, go ahead.
I was going to say that in Oakmont, most people don't have more than 30 feet. Of course, there are people that do, but predominantly they can only handle their backyard. If I went 30 feet in both directions, I would be in my neighbor's yard, which I'd love to do, but I don't have the right to do.
Okay, so I won't spend a lot of time there, but if folks want to go back and reference, they can. Okay, so given that we've got our 30 feet, thank you, Iris. So step 2 is to get rid of all the dead stuff. This costs pretty much no money. Even if you do it a little at a time and put it in your green waste bin. I do that sometimes. I'll go out and trim my trees and then, throw a pile in the back of my truck, assuming I'm going to take it to the recycler we have up here that recycles that material. And if I don't, as I as it sits in the back of my truck, I'll start throwing it in the green waste bin. The truck is like a holding area until I either drive it to the recycler or little by little put it in the green waste. Even if you go out there, like Confucius says, take your time, but get it done. Even if you do a little at a time, start from the building and start working outward and start taking that dead stuff, throw it in your green waste bin and, get it hauled away. Or do it on a weekend, create a big project and, take it to the landfill. But get it done. That's a priority. Get rid of the dead stuff immediately. Get that stuff off the roof, out of your gutters, away from your house, all the way out to that 30 feet. But start from the house, start from the building and work out. You never know. You might have to leave and evacuate before you get it all done. So that's it. So that's what it looks like. In this case, we've kind of got rid of some dead stuff, cut that dead tree down, took that old dead tree on the ground away, got the stuff off the roof and cleaned the gutter. All right. So then let's look at what we're going to do. Well, here's a detail of step two. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. This is also in the booklet. But, if you've got a standing dead tree, take it down. Iris or Katie, do you guys have any permit requirements for removing trees? I know where I live, our CCNRs say that if your tree is bigger than 6 inches in diameter, dead or not, we have to get a permit to remove it through our homeowners. Do you guys have anything like that?
I think it has to be a certain dimension. The trunk has to be, it's a lot bigger than 6 inches though.
Okay, yeah.
But I can tell you right now, if you've got a dead tree, it would be better to ask for forgiveness in the fire season and get rid of it and say mea culpa.
Yep, there you go. And you've got every rational reason to do that based on safety and, your personal safety and the safety of your community. Definitely down dead trees. Be careful with down dead trees. If they're, if you assess it and it looks like it's really moist and there's habitat in there, you may want to reconsider it. But if it's dry and rotten and definitely combustible, definitely garbage, get rid of it. Dead shrubs, definitely get those out of there. Construction debris, if you did that remodel project and you've got a few sheets of old siding laying out there you haven't got rid of, you were going to save for a project and didn't, that'd be me. Get that out of there. Dried grasses, wild flowers, trim those up. Weeds, dead needles, leaves, branches on the ground and on the roof. Twigs, stuff like that. Old firewood, get the firewood away from your house. All those kinds of things you can imagine. This is a short list probably compared to what you all can imagine. So step 3 is to break up. So that's step 2. So step 1, to reiterate, is to determine your distance. Well, we're going to say it's 30 feet. For this particular community. Step 2 is to get rid of all the dead stuff. Okay, you've done that now. So now we're looking better. Now step 3 is to break up the continuous vegetation. And, it's kind of like in our last presentation, we talked about the 0 to 5 foot. And we talked about exchanging your wooden gate in your fence with a metal one, so that when your fence catches on fire, it won't act like a fuse going all the way to your house to catch your house on fire like a stick of dynamite. It'll get to that metal gate and stop burning, ideally. And so that's the concept here. You want to make, yes?
I was going to say that one of the things I heard recently was if you haven't had chance to change your gate, to at least tie it open when you evacuate, and tie it strong so that the wind won't be able to blow it shut again. That would at least break the fuse, like you mentioned, the dynamite fuse to the house.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we did mention that in our last presentation. Yeah. And so that's the concept here, is to, if you know, if this catches on fire here, you don't want it to go burn that, then burn that, then burn that all the way and then catch your house on fire. Same here with all this ugly stuff here. You don't want something to land here and then go all the way to your house. After the Valley Fire, I was driving around our community here, and there are a handful of homes where embers landed in, for the most part, I think juniper bushes or things like that, combustible vegetation, next to fences where the plant caught on fire and then caught the fence on fire and then caught the house on fire. In a couple cases, they were put out. I can tell where they were extinguished. The fire was extinguished before it got into the house. And in a couple other cases, we've lost homes in the community because of exactly that. So you want to break that all up. And so, you know, that's what we did here. You know, we kind of got some space here. We got rid of some of this junk over here, replaced it with some green stuff. So we want to break that up, thin it out so you don't have all these guys touching. Okay, so this is kind of like, you know, a graphic illustrating it. So this is before. You can imagine if a fire starts over here all the way on the right, you know, catches these bushes, get them going, and then catches this tree and burns all the way across there. Then you have a forest fire, you've got a big fire. But if we can get in there and thin some of that out, you get a fire here, you know, it's not going to get big enough to get all the way to here. So that's our concept there.
A lot of people have fear that if they thin out like that, that the place is going to look denuded. And it's not. I mean, I've been to some places here in Oakmont where they have taken out junipers and some of the HOAs, and it just looks cleaner. The same thing happened here at our golf course at the restaurant. There was a lot of cleanup done about overgrown vegetation, and it didn't look like, oh my God, they've taken stuff out. It just looked like, wow, this looks really nice. What happened? And it was just cleaned out and thinned out.
But yeah, and it is healthier. You know, the experts are telling me that, you know, the crowded vegetation is not healthy for it. It needs to breathe. You don't want all these plants competing for sunlight and water and everything else. So I'm gonna just go past this slide pretty quickly, but it's basically saying that depending on your slope, your distance between clumps of shrubs and things like that need to be spread out. So, you know, we're not talking single bushes necessarily here, but clumps of. If you've got 2 or 3 here, you know, have it, you know, before the next group of bushes or shrubs, you know, have it 4 times the height away if you're 21 to 40. You know, if you're flat, you know, 2 times away is good. And in the end, Katie and Iris shared some photos from your community. At the end of the presentation, we'll go through some photos from your community and kind of talk about it and look at how people have done these things. And then for trees, similarly, there's criteria, you know, 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, depending on the slope. And, you know, you don't need to go out there with a measuring tape and measure this. It's not that scientific. These numbers are quite arbitrary, but they are based on science telling us that, okay, you need more distance on a steeper slope between stuff. So the experts that memorialize these criteria come up with, you know, standards that we can shoot for. You know, if you're on, you know, 41% slope and you've got it 29.5 feet, okay, good, you know. So that's kind of what we're talking about.
Also,
Yeah.
I'd like to point out that that distance is measured from the canopy of the tree and not the trunk of the tree.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so this is how we're looking now. Not too bad. We got rid of some stuff. You know, we've reduced the continuity of the stuff, the continuous vegetation. So our step 4 is to take a look around and see if there's any ladder fields. How low are the tree limbs to the ground? Are they right on the ground or the grass is gonna catch on fire? Is the grass really high? Do we need to cut it down? We need to put some space between tree canopy and bushes, or tree canopy and grassland that's underneath it. or even combustibles. If you've got a picnic table under there, you might want to rethink that. Move it under there, under the shade. But if you've got that red flag warning, get it out from under that tree. Um, so that's what we're going to look at here at step 4. So here's some detail with step 4. This is what it looks like after we do all that work. Clean it up a little bit. Just trying to impress you with my slide work. Anyway, step 4. Okay, so remove the ladder fields, and they're called ladder fields because a fire can climb those fields into a tree canopy. And so look around and get your loppers out and do some trimming and fill up that green waste bin, or turn it into a weekend project, have a, remember back in the day we'd do, re-roofing parties. I've been to a few of those with friends in the fire department. It's like, hey, I'm going to re-roof my house. Come on over and help me. It's like, sure. You probably only do it once, but, you go over and have a good time. Well, you could do that at your home. Let's go have a landscaping party at my house, or a defensible space party. Get a group of folks together and then get her done. But at least for now, fill up that green yard bin, a little at a time, even get it done. So this is kind of like the recommended distance. If you've got a shrub, 3 times the height of the shrub to the canopy. So either trim the canopy up or cut the shrub down. If you've got those ladder fields nearby there. Okay, and then step 5 is to do, this is where we get into the meat of the fun part of your landscaping. Choosing plants that work well, that are fire safe and look cool, and integrating them into your landscape environment to create a nice, comfortable, good feeling of a environment that you want to spend time in, your outdoor living area. We're not talking about making a moonscape here. We got the dead stuff out. We've done some trimming and cutting of grass and all that. So now we're looking around and going, okay, let's get rid of the really unsafe plants, and let's keep the really good, safe plants and the well irrigated plants, and let's make this pretty without making it a moonscape, but let's do it sensibly. That's what we're talking about here. And also in this area, we're looking at, that trimming stuff up with regard to vegetation is close to the house. I get nervous if you've got trees hanging over your roof, because if an ember lands in that tree, it can catch your house on fire. Whereas if a tree's away from your house and your roof is clean, you've got a Class A roof, ember can land there, okay, no worries. If you've got a tree right next to it and you've had these warm, dry, drought days, and you've got, this fuel right next to your house is drying out, and then you get a fire over here, the radiant heat is going to further dry it out, and all you need is a little ember, fly through the air, land in there, and then you easily ignite this dry, hot tree. Next thing you know, your house is on fire. So I'm guilty of having a tree over my roof at my house. I try to trim it back as best I can to get it off the roof. But it is what it is. That's a risk that I'm accepting right now. But I recommend get the trees away from the roof. The code, however, requires that you at least keep branches 10 feet away from a chimney. And any dead wood, if you've got dead stuff, overhanging your roof, it's got to come out. That's code. But live trees, technically, according to the California codes and Sonoma County codes, and I believe Santa Rosa codes, if it's a live tree, it can hang over your roof. But if it's a dead tree, it's got to go. Definitely at least 10 feet away from the chimney. Go ahead, Iris.
What the new policy in Oakmont will be calling for is that the branches hanging over a tree, branches hanging over a roof should be at least 6 foot clear of the roof and kept 6 foot clear of the roof. It's 10 foot away from the chimney, but anything else that's not related to the chimney, if it's over the roof, it has to be trimmed up each year to be 6 feet away from the roof.
Excellent. Good. Yeah, I like that. Um, well, let's see what happens as legislation evolves based on our, current experiences. So let's go in and do that. So now we've trimmed all that up, got it away from the house, away from there. And then let's take another step and look at some things we can do to make this the lean, clean, and green area around your house. So once again, we ask the question, is there an area at least 30 feet wide surrounding the house that is lean, clean, and green? Firewise and beautiful. Um, step one, use low growing herbaceous, non-woody plants, that can be kept green during fire season, either through irrigation or if they're naturally, moist throughout. That's one of the things that are insidious about junipers. And I think, that family or that species of plant is on the outside, it can look very healthy and pretty green. But if you pull that back and look inside, I mean, it's just ugly in there and dry in there. So we're not just talking about the exterior of this thing. Look inside it and make sure it's not dry and ugly inside. It's got to be nice and moist and well irrigated all the way through. I've seen lawns, well irrigated lawns burning on fire, in some of these wildland fires when I was still on the fire engine. It's just nuts. So we go through there and yep, did that. Okay, so next thing, let's emphasize the use of mulches and rock and non-combustible hard surfaces. Do some hardscaping.
I think this one is done well. This is an Oakmont house newly done. Sue and Jane live there. And you've got the rock mulch, you've got some colorful low plants,
Yeah,
uh, you've got a walkway. And
I
so
like
with
that.
all nation, you've taken care of your 5 foot zone.
Yeah, and this is an excellent example. I think we may have even used this to illustrate the 0 to 5 foot zone earlier.
Yeah,
But as you can tell, there's still trees here and stuff. They're trimmed up. These things, the shrubs are trimmed low,
yeah,
low growing plants in front of the window, and hardscape walkway here, hardscape pavers here. Those are beautiful. This is
yeah.
really pretty. So it can be done. So we did that.
Mhm.
Um, those ornamental trees and shrubs, they're acceptable if they're kept green and free of dead plant material. If you have it, maintain it. This is a beautiful, I think it's a lemon or orange tree. Well maintained, trimmed up, a little bit over the roof, but it's moist. It's not dry and dead. I don't have good perspective here, but I would guess that it's probably 6 feet off your roof line. Um, so you can have those, just think about where you're putting them and how big they're going to grow at maturity. When you look at the numbers that we showed you earlier, remember those numbers are not to be measured when you plant something. Those numbers are to be measured based on whatever you're planting at maturity. So look in the Sunset, plant book or whatever reference you're using and figure out how big the thing's going to be at maturity, and then use that as your target. Um, Minimize the use of ornamental coniferous shrubs and trees such as juniper, Monterey pine, and tall exotic grasses. Pampas grass. I remember when I was a boot firefighter, I went to a pampas grass fire. Man, that thing was hard to put out. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. We almost called for a second fire engine because it was close to a house. And the guys were laughing at me, because I'm brand new working the house, trying to put this out. And man, I could not put it out for the life of me. And they were just like laughing. Yeah, that's a pampas grass. Those things are terrible. But
I'd like,
we put it out.
I'd like to think about this photo. This was recently done at Laurel Leaf Place, Fall Green 2, where they took out, the HOA took out junipers that were closer to the house. And they did like 9 houses in, I think a day and a half of just, putting this in a truck, and they had loaded, and there's still junipers there. You can't tell when you go over there that it looks like, oh my God, what did they do? It just looks more open and clean, and there's still other junipers there, but they're just not as close to the house.
So yeah, try not to use those kinds of shrubs and vegetation. So where permitted, some wildland shrubs and trees, might need to be removed and replaced with more desirable alternatives. So once again, we're back to the, get rid of the ladder fields, keep the grass short, limb these guys up, keep them healthy, keep them green. Don't let them die and dry out. And, if you don't know how to do it, invite a friend over who can help you, teach you how to do it correctly. Or if you have the money, you may want to have it done by an expert. But, there are tricks to it. Don't do what I did and just go out willy-nilly and start cutting stuff.
I'd like to point out that on our Firewise committee, we have one of our members is quite, he used to own a nursery, and he's very good at tree, how to trim a tree properly. So we have access to him for people who might inquire here at Oakmont.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. So you guys have a built-in resource.
Yes, we do.
Cool. Okay. So, all right, we've got step 5 done. Let's do step 6. Some areas require substantial removal of vegetation, but it might not be allowed. So in these instances, you still want to cut and limb and divide and provide space. But I think the biggest area to be careful of is near a creek or waterway. The riparian way, in my opinion, is a really big watch out area. If it's your property, other than that, you might be okay. But pay attention to the, the animal life and see, where they're going and try not to get in their way.
I'd like to speak on this film. This photo is at a home here in Oakmont, and this is their side patio with their barbecue. You see it's on a concrete aggregate
right here.
patio. Yeah. And then to the left, there's some intermittent low plants with some rock layouts and some art. I mean, it's very artistically done. It feels lived in, but it also is a very safe area. It's not too far. It's in the zone 2 that we're talking about. So it's well done.
Yeah, so then that's step 6. And then step 7, try to keep things trimmed if you've got above ground power lines. I think, isn't most of your guys' community underground, or do you have a?
No, it is. No, well, I mean, we have these kind of things going right across Oakmont.
Yeah.
Right through the golf course.
Yeah. So here's like a stunning example of exactly that the utility company has done. All the way to dirt in this case. It's an extreme example, but if, like my house, I've got one of my oak trees that, that my service line to the building, to the house, goes through the oak tree. So I have to, that's one of my maintenance things, is to, make sure when I'm out there with the loppers is to keep it trim around there. But you don't want to accidentally cut the power line. And you're out there kind of with the loppers. That would be very bad. So then, step 6. Oh, actually, step 6 is our final step in our 6-step process. And that's to, maintain all of this, as I just mentioned. I want to keep my oak tree trimmed away from the power lines. You got to keep after this. This isn't like a one-time thing and you forget about it. A couple times a year, at least probably, you got to be out there and working on this thing. So yeah, keep after it. So here's what it looks like. We've all done. You remember what we started with? We had these trees around the chimney and on the house, all this junk up here. We had a dead tree on the ground here. We had a dead tree here we took out. We reduced the continuous material here, and it looks, I think this looks better than what we started with, so.
Yeah.
I think we did a good job, you guys. I think we did a good job. So all that hard work, yes, this is good. And this is much, much safer than what we started with by far. Um, so as I mentioned, this material is in the Living with Fire in Sonoma County booklet. Um, and I think what we're going to do next is we're going to look at a series of images from your community. And I'm going to have Katie and Iris kind of talk about, you know, what those images are and what folks have done to kind of show you some really good examples of what people have done. And either Katie or Iris, just tell me when you want me to flip the slide.
Okay, this is the front of my home and I'm on a hillside slope. One of our issues was we wanted to also have no steps to the front door, which is why we have this thing that looks like a skate ramp. But you'll notice that the 5-foot zone is fairly protected because of the sidewalk and then the low plants. And then the other thing about zone 2 that you had mentioned, Roberta, was that you want to have sections of plants and break it up with hardscape in between, or rock mulch or whatever. So, and there's also rock mulch underneath all of these plants. Even though it looks kind of like the color of bark, you can choose rocks that really blend into the ground. They don't have to be white or black. And they need to be approved by the architectural committee here anyway. And also the size of the rock that you get, you want to get at least 1.5 inches so that you can blow the dead leaves off and stuff like that without blowing the rock while you're cleaning it.
That is a good idea. I should have thought of that. I used a lot of pea gravel for mulch around my place, but then when I go to blow the leaves off, I have to be very careful with the leaf blower that I don't blow all the pea gravel all over.
Yeah. So you could go to the next slide.
Okay.
This is another friend of ours' house in Oakmont. They've done a really beautiful job of, they have a sense of spareness, but that's their style. And they also have the rock mulch between the sidewalk. And then they have these low plants as the hill goes up, and then they have trees up at the higher section. So again, it doesn't look denuded. It just looks spare and green, lean, clean, and green, like you mentioned. Next.
Okay.
And we already saw that one. I spoke about that one.
Yeah.
This one, this is really neat. This is our friend Jean and Carol's house. And when I saw this on a landscape plan, I thought, this is going to be weird. But it's really, really interesting. It's got a little place of grass because they have a dog, and Lucy loves to be on that grass. And then there's rock mulch in between, and there's some succulents, and there's some low plants, and there used to be a huge palm tree in front of this house when they first moved here. So it's looking very interesting and cared for, and lean, clean, and green.
Perfect.
Next. And this is the back of that house. And there's monkey grass in the back there off of that deck. I hadn't heard of it until Jean told me about it. You don't have to cut it with a lawnmower or anything. And the dog, Lucy, likes that as well. And you see the rock, and then there's a golf screen because they live on the golf course to keep the golf balls from killing the people who are dining out there.
Perfect. I like this one. I love the colors.
And this is the front of that same house between the two houses. A lot of times the houses here in Oakmont are close together, and these two neighbors agreed to, you know, kind of make it look like a shared space between them. And you don't have a line down the middle and one type of planting on the left and one on the right. And it looks very natural and cared for. And that's rock mulch with irises and some low plants. And I don't remember what kind of purple flowers they are, but they're beautiful. Next.
Yeah.
And we talked about the one on the right. This is another picture on the other side of that house where they use a different type of stone instead of solid sidewalk with natural. I forget what kind of plant that is in between that grows. It's very nice looking.
It's here. Yeah. Yeah, I really love the way they did these pavers with the the
Yeah.
grass, I guess, between. It's really cool.
And next.
Okay.
Okay, this we talked about the one on the left. The one on the right is another. This is as you approach the front of the house. They have more rocks and low plants, but you can see the curve rather than having a straight line again to make it interesting. And then you get to the bark and the lower plants out of the 5-foot zone.
Yeah, in bark, you really don't want bark like right up against the house as a mulch material, but out 5 or 10 feet, it's not going to be a problem, I don't
Yeah,
believe. As long as, imagine if something lands in there and bark will smolder for a very long time. As long
yeah,
as it can't ignite anything else like your house,
yeah.
it's probably going to be okay.
And Roberta, the new Oakmont rule will be effective by next August. Everyone who has bark within the first 5 feet has to remove it in the first 5 feet. And you can put other kind of mulch, or you can have bare dirt, or you can, but no, none of that bark because of the smoldering and the possibility of fire. Um,
Any questions any folks have? Or Iris or Katie, do you want to spend a little time talking about what else is going on out there?
While we're waiting, I would like to say that there was a fire that broke out in Oakmont about 4 days after the lightning strike um, on hole 12 in the golf course. It was the yard right there next to it because there was overgrown uh, ladder fuel into tall trees. We don't know what started it. Fortunately, 4 golfers saw it while they were golfing. They went right over. They stole some hoses from next door because there wasn't a hose there at the house. And they were hosing it down and called the fire department. Fire department came out and they said it could have been from a lightning strike. They never found the source because there was bark enough or tree roots traveling underneath in terms of fire, or it could have been a cigarette ash. But it was a miracle that 4 golfers happened to come by and see it in flame and took action.
Yeah, that's a lucky thing. Okay, so a question from Mary. How do you deal with an association maintained group which is resistant to spending money? Does your right to make positive changes override your HOA? I'm not sure what they're asking there. You guys may have a better feel for what
Yeah,
they're asking.
I think they're talking about their sub HOA. There's a big umbrella HOA of OVA. All homes are under it, and then there are some homes here that are under a sub HOA that nothing outside can be changed without approval of that uh, board before you go to the architecture committee of the big umbrella. And a lot of them are tight on money in terms of their reserve. But when people have cancer, they don't talk about what the cost is. They go get the cancer removed. And what we're talking about now is no matter how much money it costs, and if money even has to be borrowed, we have got, for our own safety and the safety of everyone around us, to make this an urgent emergency 911 priority. I mean, with fires all around us and the whole state and Oregon and all the West Coast burning, we can't just leave this and not do whatever it takes to be safe. So I think you have to be persistent, and you have to keep you just have to keep. I guess in North Carolina they call it just keep raising hell until something is done. This little 9-home HOA that took out those junipers, they didn't have a lot of money, but they made it a priority, and they used their reserve to make their place safer. And in the new rules that are going to be passed this week coming up with the board, this next year the 0 to 5 feet has to be cleaned out, regardless of whether the HOA wants to do it or not. But so by August of next year, it has to be done. So I would say to this person, concentrate on the 0 to 5 foot rule that's going to be confirmed as of Tuesday, and then the second year, you have to work on the trees and limbing and dead trees and that type of thing. That's going to cost more. So a lot of these HOAs are going to have to raise their dues enough. And if they're bigger HOAs, you know, a little money each month, like a savings account, will make a contribution to getting this done.
Yeah, where I live, there's a certain date in the year, I think it's May 5th, where they start doing home inspections. And if your home doesn't meet the criteria, they'll send a crew out to do it. And
Yeah,
mostly where I live, it's all about fire safety, defensible space,
yeah,
um, you know, with regard to what I'm talking about now. And, you know, they'll do it and then they'll charge you for it. They'll fine you for it. So,
yeah.
um,
Well, there is going to be enforcement, but in the
yeah.
meantime, we're trying to scare people. We're trying to get them motivated. And I don't know what else can motivate you if fires are surrounding us every year here. That seems to me a really good motivation.
Yeah. So Peggy asks if you have a pool with a cover and you need to evacuate, should you put the pool cover on or leave it off? And if I have time, try to put my pool cover over the pool. I have an above ground pool, so it's obvious that there is a pool there for firefighters. Mostly I do that to keep the water clean from getting filled with ash and debris from wind blown materials, etc. And I think what Peggy's asking is, you know, if you leave she's heard different stories. One is that if you leave the cover off, that the helicopter can scoop it up. It's going to be a very rare situation where a helicopter is going to take water out of somebody's swimming pool. Doesn't doesn't really happen. That would have to be a very, very large pool, you know, for them to do that. Where you will see firefighters use a swimming pool is most fire engines have what's called a trash pump or a water pump, a small water pump that they can drag out of a compartment on the fire engine and take it to the backyard or where the pool is, drop a hose line into the pool, suck the water out, and put fires out that way. I've actually done that a few times on fires. So it's kind of up to you in terms of how much mess you want to deal with when you come back from being evacuated, in my opinion. The other thing too, I think, is if you leave the pool cover on and it's warm, less water is going to evaporate. So it will leave a little bit more water in there for firefighting if the firefighters do want to use your pool. But if a fire engine is near your house and they're doing what's called structure protection, they're going to run around your house and look around to see what they need to move away from your house that's combustible. And when they see the pool there, they'll know, okay, good, they've got a pool. We can use the portable pump, you know, if we need to here. So that's my response to that, Peggy.
Would you speak, Roberta, about the importance of coming through to a house, going around it, how important it is to have enough clearance? You know,
Yeah,
that
so that's the other thing, you know, firefighters will do what's called structural triage. So, you know, there's only so many resources to go around. So if a fire captain is assessing what structures he's going to risk his folks at protecting, they're going to protect the ones that are salvageable. They'll triage and select the houses that they can actually save. And those are the ones that have the defensible space. You know, if you're looking at, you know, a house that's hasn't done anything, trees overgrown, dry grass, you know, homeowner clearly doesn't care about the house. They're probably not going to call that a house that they want to risk saving. Whereas if you have a home that's clearly been maintained, well cared for, the firefighters aren't going to be putting themselves at serious risk trying to save that home. That's the one that they're going to try to save.
what I've noticed, a lot of the houses here in Oakmont, they have these, you know, you used to plant bushes and hedges in front of your windows so people couldn't see in. Of course, it made it dark, but it also, and a lot of these people have them on the sides of their house. You open the gate, you can barely get through. And it's especially if you guys have hedges by your windows or doors, they really need to come out, or because that heat of that plant getting right there next to the window or door is
Yeah.
really bad.
Yeah, keep the kindling away from the big wood. The kindling starts the big wood on fire. Paula writes, what is the protocol for a neighbor's fruit tree and other bushes hanging over the top of the community fence to their defensible space? And if any actions taken, I think she's asking, will there be an arbiter, somebody to settle this, arbiter?
If it's hanging in your yard, I mean, hopefully you can talk to your neighbor and ask them to prune it back. But if not, if it's in your yard and you can reach it, I mean, what are they going to do? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. The way I've been living my life is if somebody's stuff is over the property line, I'll cut it. And everybody I've talked to, from my insurance carrier to code enforcers. And I used to do that kind of enforcement when I was a fire inspector. I tell people, I go, anything that's over that property line from the ground to the sky, that's yours, cut it, if it's in your defensible space, definitely cut it. Go as far as you can to that property line. Just if it's over on your side, it's yours. Cut it. The problem is it is yours. So whatever you cut, you have to, dispense with. But it's funny because
What the green waste basket's for.
that's right. Cut it, put it in that green waste bin. Berkeley, years ago when solar panels started becoming popular, the city of Berkeley created an ordinance. Shoot, I forget what it was called. But they created an ordinance that said that your neighbor's tree could not block your solar panel. So if your neighbor's tree shaded your solar panel, they would have to trim it. Period, stop, end of story. I'm like, wow, that's pretty aggressive, but, it was all about, being able to generate electricity and use solar power effectively. So.
Well, the bigger picture is we need to be using more green methods of developing and producing energy, because it's the greenhouse gases from all of the oil and gas that we're using that is causing the climate change in the atmosphere. And I mean, it's the big picture and the little picture. But on this webinar, we're just starting from the house out.
Yep.
But we have a bigger problem, as can be seen by 13 states in the West on fire.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I went to solar power, and I got to tell you, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. I'm so happy with my solar power.
I wanted to remind you that they can get solar batteries, even if you don't have solar. You can get some battery backup instead of a generator, gas generator, if you want to. And we have several solar companies that are working here in Oakmont doing that.
I might follow up with you on that, Iris, because I'm about ready to add batteries to my system.
Good.
Tesla has a product they call Powerwall. I'm looking at that, but I might talk to you later about that offline.
Yeah.
So Ron Kaufman writes, are you still providing a representative to come to your home and conduct a fire safe inspection? Are you guys doing that in Oakmont at all? Fire Safe Sonoma, we offer that.
Yeah, we are. We do have a couple of, I was interviewing someone yesterday. We do have a couple of, one consultant that will do it at a charge. We also have a company that will come out and do it for $75, home hardening and your landscaping. And then they will also give you an offer of changing your vents. They will do it. They are licensed to do that and do it to the fire safe ones. And then we also have the Firewise committee. If you want someone from the committee to come, you can email me at morejoy43@gmail.com, and we will have someone from the committee come over and help you maybe prioritize what needs to be done.
Yeah, and then also Fire Safe Sonoma, we have a limited number of wildland fire assessments that we can do, but it sounds like you guys are already providing that resource, so I don't want to be duplicative there. Um, you know,
Well, no, we have like, 3,500 homes here, and
yeah,
probably neither of these companies can do all of them. So we're open to
yeah,
every possible.
yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, Fire Safe Sonoma, we have and we offer it for free. For right now, it's a grant funded
that's
project
great.
right now.
That's
So,
great. Who would we
so
contact to get that going?
actually, if you go to Fire Safe Sonoma's website on our contact page, you'll
Yeah.
see the WFAP, Wildland Fire Assessment Project.
Uh-huh.
You can sign up through that link. So click that link, you could sign up and get on the list, and then we'll send an assessor out.
Great. Great. Thank you.
Also be aware that Fire Safe Sonoma, we're a nonprofit, we do take donations.
That's good. It's great that you guys exist.
Yeah, thanks. Catherine writes, approximately 2 months ago, I landscaped our front yard, was going to put a gravel that looked like dirt for a cost of around 900. The OVA forced me to put in bark at a cost of 2,100. Tried to explain the fire concern. They told me that the bark is not a fire concern. Not going to pay to redo my yard when I wanted to put in the gravel. What will happen when the WTO, when those of us were forced to put in bark?
This is a really
Oh, what
sad.
will happen when those of us were forced to put in bark?
This
That's
is
really
sad,
awful.
but the architectural committee was doing its job under the old rules, and the old rules are about to change on Tuesday. And so, um, that's not very unfortunate situation. I think bark is. I mean, anybody wants to see Stephen Quarles' um, video on the bark study and its flammability, it's pretty obvious that I mean, of course, everything can burn, including bark, but bark is, I think, famous for having things smolder underneath and have the fire travel somewhere else and then come up. So it's unfortunate that that happened, and that's all I can tell you. But it will have to be, if it's within 5 feet of the house, it will need to be removed. After this board meeting, it should, everything pass, it should be that you can have rock mulch. There's no more 15% minimum rule, uh, uh, 15% maximum rule up until this gets passed, you're technically not able to have rock as mulch in the front yard if it covers more than 15%, but that's going away. I'm expecting the board to vote for that on Tuesday, that you can put rock mulch anywhere around as long as it's approved by the architectural committee with the plants that you're going to be putting in. There's no rock limit. It just has to look nice. It has to be approved by the architectural committee.
Yeah, and the sad thing about the term bark is used a lot interchangeably with wood chips.
Right.
Wood chips is not bark, but most of what we call bark mulch is wood chips. And when we say bark, we're usually talking about wood chips, not actual like redwood tree bark, which is not as combustible um, early on
Yeah.
as just raw wood chips, but anything will burn, like Ira said.
Yeah. And even in Marin County, they've spent a lot of money on their fire safe policies, and they said even redwood bark, when it gets old and dry and starts to deteriorate, it's also as flammable.
Yeah,
So, and we don't want to have to get into fights about, is this redwood mulch or is this just wood chips, or we just no wood bark of any kind in the first 5 feet.
yeah. Okay. Mary writes, when you say lawn furniture, do you include metal and glass? No. I have non-combustible lawn furniture on my front porch, Mary, and it's like metal furniture. metal table. And I bought those specifically because they're non-combustible in my 0 to 5 foot zone. So yeah, when we talk about the lawn furniture, we're talking about combustible furniture. So if you have metal furniture, but you've got cushions on them, you know, when you get to that red flag warning or the set in the ready, set, go, take those off and take them inside the house or put them in your garage with the door shut or put them somewhere other than that 0 to 5 foot home ignition zone. But yeah, metal furniture, glass furniture, not as much of a concern. Um, let's see. A firefighter told my neighbor that oleander, when burning, has toxic fumes. Firefighters not anxious to breathe that smoke, so maybe they don't prioritize working near the oleander. Um, I'll tell you, I've been a firefighter for over 35 years, never heard this, but I will tell you that most firefighters don't know the difference between an oleander and a redwood tree. So I'm serious. You know, they're gonna go put the wet stuff on the red stuff. And they're not, you know, gonna, most of them aren't going to, you know, look at it and go, oh my gosh, that's this kind of plant. It gives off this kind of fumes. I'm not gonna go there. They're not doing that. Smoke is toxic. Smoke from a burning house has worse materials, heavy metals, toxics in it than any plant that I can imagine. Um, and it's everywhere. You're breathing the smoke. You know, drive through Oregon right now. You know, drive through almost anywhere in the western states right now. You're breathing toxic smoke and toxic ash. It's got all kinds of junk in it, plastics, you know, burnt metal, heavy metals. You know, don't breathe smoke, period. If you're a firefighter, you're going to be exposed to that stuff worse than most people. And it's part of the deal. Um, some firefighters probably know which plants are more toxic than others, but most firefighters aren't going to triage a house or structure protection or whatever based on the plant types. That's my personal belief with 35 years of being in the fire service, about 2/3 of that on a fire engine.
That's great. Good to hear.
Um, let's see, Mary writes, how do you deal with an association maintained group which is resistant to spending money? Does your right to make positive change override your HOA? I think that's a
We've
duplicate.
already done that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've gone through all the open for. Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. I'm so sorry. Um, let's see. Mary writes, I've heard that. Oh, Mary writes the same thing. I've heard that oleanders need to come out because of poisonous off gassing. I'd like to know who this firefighter is that's sharing this information.
Well, you know, I like what you said. They'll put wet stuff on the red stuff.
Yeah, you know, I imagine there's firefighters out there who know a lot about plants, but I'm telling you, my experience is most firefighters don't know a lot about plants and they don't teach you that stuff. I'm working with a group of folks from the Sonoma Ecology Center, Master Gardener, the UC Davis Co-op Extension, and Habitat Corridor. We're working together, mostly them. I'm helping them. They're the experts on coming up with an Firewise landscaping education program to teach people how to install Firewise and fire resilient landscaping. And our 4 target audiences are landscape architects and designers, landscapers, the people who install and maintain this stuff, the general public, homeowners who are doing this and are maintaining it themselves. And the 4th target group is firefighters, because we recognize that firefighters don't know about this stuff. And we want them to know about this stuff. So they're not out there telling people, cut everything down, make it a moonscape. We want them to be aware of what plants are okay as long as they're well irrigated, and what plants really need to go,
Yeah.
and to share that message. Because right now, for the most part, firefighters are saying, you know what? If it's a plant, it'll burn, take it out. Trim it, limb it, get it out.
I wanted to point out that on October 10th, Roberta is going to, and Katie and I are going to be doing the third and final webinar on home hardening. And that is really something I'm very excited about, that we're going to go over that, because that's been my background in terms of being a general contractor. And both Katie and I have done a lot of things to our homes for home hardening. I wanted to point out that, for instance, a good paint job with a lot of caulk, I mean, a lot of caulk. I had my house repainted. They spent 3 days caulking this house before they started painting. And that will cover up a lot of the crevices that burning embers and brands can get into. So that's just a little hint for the home hardening, more exciting stuff we will be talking about.
Yeah. Yep. Coming up. So stay tuned. Okay. Patricia writes, our homeowners association saves money on water by letting the grass get a little brown every summer. Is brownish green grass very dangerous? Well, it's not as dangerous as all brown dry grass, but it's more dangerous than all green grass. And if you keep it short and prevent it from being a ladder fuel, and treat it like every other vegetation on your landscape, provide separation between it and your house with some hardscaping, or some non-combustible mulch, probably not going to be a problem. Just don't let it be brownish green grass that's 8 or 10 or 12 inches tall. That's a problem. But if it's if it's short, if it goes dormant and comes back in the wetter seasons, then probably not a problem. Iris or Katie, do you want to weigh in on that one? Your thoughts?
What do you think, Katie?
Well, part of the new policy is to keep our wildfire grasses no higher than 4 inches, either mechanically or by sheep or by whatever. So, if you do have this brownish green grass, I would say keep it shorter than your green grass. It'll reduce the fire tendency for that.
Don't let it die, though.
Not all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't kill it.
I just
Yeah.
wonder how much money the HOA saves by letting it do that, go dormant.
I don't know. Yeah. Patricia writes, do the solar panels on the roof provide areas to catch embers? The solar panels themselves, for the most part, don't. But what happens with solar panels is you create these changes of direction on your roof that are collectors for dry debris like dry leaves, pine needles, things like that. So when you're up there cleaning your rain gutters, or even if you have rain gutters that have the screens over them, if you have solar panels, you may want to pop up there on the roof, once in a while, and make sure you don't have a buildup of leaves and stuff, in those little nooks and crannies where your connectors between your solar panels connect to the roof. They have little standoffs or stanchions up there. I know my solar panels, because of the angle of my roof, they didn't have to put a lot of space between the panels in the roof. So yeah, I've got about a 4-inch gap under there that, is a real good collector for leaves and things like that. So, and your solar panels themselves, you want to wash them once in a while because they'll get film and dirt on top of them to reduce their efficiency. So, I'd say at least once a year, get up there early in the summer season and hose those guys off and take a look underneath them. And if you've got a leaf blower, make sure that there's not a bunch of junk underneath those. Iris, you're a builder, you're contractor. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think people should clean their solar panels about twice a year, and also the roof. I mean, you want to be ready pre-fire season. And also after the winter with all the storms and stuff, before the spring comes, you still have a lot of collection at that point. And even if you have gutter guards, I have really good gutter guards in terms of the gutters, but a lot of, even though plants and stuff don't, the leaves come off, there's a lot of grit and other stuff that gets down into it. And it's nice. You want those gutters flowing well when the rain comes, and you don't want it to have sludge in the bottom with mud and dirt collected in there. So those need to be cleaned out, and you need to make sure your downspouts are definitely clean, that they don't, because what happens with sludge and stuff that gets in the gutter, it goes into the downspout and then it can't get out and it starts to clog up, and that can create a real problem.
Yeah. Okay, that was the last question in the queue. So I think we've answered all of our questions. Thanks, Iris and Katie, for all the work you're doing out there in the community, and for championing this series. Very cool. I hope a lot of folks are getting a lot out of it. And yeah, so that's all we have. I would say roll credits if we had credits.
All right, have a good weekend, everybody.
All right, you guys. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Roberta.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Bye-bye.